And so we've all seen how to take your spreadsheet file, upload it to Claude, to Gemini, to ChatGPT, and write a simple prompt and say, analyze this data for me. But that's not how we work in statistics or in data science. We want rigorous results. We want robust results. We really want to be careful with our analysis. And above all, we probably want a Jupyter notebook. Now, today I'm going to show you how to use an agent inside of Visual Studio Code that is just going to create that whole notebook for you, do all the analysis, create a beautiful research document, all through instructions to the agent and writing a comprehensive prompt. So you're going to need Visual Studio Code, you're going to need Python installed on your system, but you're not going to write any code, you're not going to populate that notebook at all. In fact, we're going to give the agent instructions and it's going to do all of the hard work for us. So here we are in Visual Studio Code. I've opened a folder and inside that folder is a single file, and that's our data file. It's in CSV format. So of course you will have to have Visual Studio Code installed, and you will also have to have Python installed on your system. Now I've got GitHub Copilot installed and activated. We can see the edit in GitHub Copilot. I've just clicked on that little button, the toggle secondary sidebar button on the top right, and I can now just chat with a model. And as you can see right at the bottom, there's different models to choose from. Now, I will say that this is the paid version of GitHub Copilot, so depending on what version you use, you'll get different models. Now, the model that I am going to use today is Claude Sonnet 4. You can see here it's in preview mode. That is what is available to me on my subscription. Now, I have tried, in all honesty, GPT 4.1 and Gemini 2.5 Pro, but really, for creating a notebook in agent mode, there is nothing that beats Claude Sonnet 4 at the moment. So that is the best model for me in generating this in an agentic workflow. So this is what we have, and I'll put a link in the description down below where to download Visual Studio Code and also how to download Python. And where to download Python and install it, you'll have to set up your own Copilot. It's very easy to do once you've opened your Visual Studio Code. So what are we to do? So if we go to the left here, we can see these icons. You'll have to click on extensions, and then you'll have to have a couple of things installed. Now you can see the extensions that I already have installed. Not all of them are required to do what we're trying to achieve in this video. You can see that I have Data Wrangler, I've got GitHub Copilot Chat. Now I can also, I also have Jupyter, and this is the important one. We want to create Jupyter notebooks. So depending on your installation, GitHub Copilot might already be there, but really the two that we require here is GitHub Copilot and Jupyter. So you can search for these if they're not installed right up there. And once they're installed in your Visual Studio Code, that's it. Let's go back right to the top to our Explorer. So I'm going to click on this second button at the top that says New Folder, and I'm going to call it .github, and I'm going to press Enter or Return. And while it's highlighted, I'm going to click on this New Folder again. So that's going to create a subfolder in that .github, and I'm going to call this Instructions. So you can see instructions, a subfolder inside of the .github folder. While it's all still highlighted, I'm going to create a new file, and this file I'm going to call notebook.instructions.md, a markdown file. So look carefully, notebook.instructions.md. I'm going to click enter and a file opens for me. Now I've already written some text. I'm going to copy and paste it in to this file and we'll have a look at it. I'm just going to collapse my Explorer on the left hand side to give us a bit more space so you can see what this file looks like. I've got a preamble there. It's just a dash 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 or minus minus minus, then apply to colon space and then notebook inside of quotation marks and then close those dashes. And then I've just got some normal markdown here. So I'm going to say notebook instructions and I'm going to precede that with a single hashtag. So that's going to be like a title to this document. And then I'm just listing all the instructions to my agent. Again, this will be in the description down below. You can just copy and paste it. But let's go through it quickly. I'm going to say start all notebooks with a Python code. and then I put that inside of little tick marks. You'll have to search for those on your own keyboard. And I'm just trying to tell the agent here that this is code that it has to write inside of those little tick marks. And it's %config inline backend.figure_format equals retina, and that retina has to go inside of quotation marks. So this is a high dots per inch monitor, so it's just going to render my plots nice and crisp. I always like to start my notebooks like that, and I want my agent to do the same. Second point here is use clear and descriptive title for the notebook. Use markdown section cells to organize the notebook into sections. Import all necessary libraries or packages, if you want to call them that, at the beginning of the notebook. Install any Python packages that are required and not yet installed. Use code cells for executable code, and under that, ensure that the code is well commented and easy to understand. Do not create excessively long code cells. Break code cells into shorter manageable chunks. Now, I have experimented with this. The agent doesn't really pay attention to that. Anyway, I've also said do not use the print statements to comment on the results of code. Use text and LaTeX in markdown cells after each code cell execution. Let's just scroll along. Instead, once again, it doesn't really listen to that instruction, but you'll see the results. It actually looks quite good. Use markdown cells with text and LaTeX for results, interpretations, explanations, comments, and documentations. I'm just trying to reiterate that. As I say, the agent doesn't always listen that well, but the end result I think we cannot argue with. So use consistent formatting throughout the notebook for a professional appearance. And that is my instructions to the agent for how to create or what I want my notebooks to look like. So I'm going to Control S or Command S just to save that. I'm going to open my Explorer again. And then I'm just going to click on a blank section here because I want to now create my Jupyter notebook. Now there are various ways to go about this. My way is slightly more pedantic, but let's go for it. I'm going to say new file, and let's call this file analysis.ipynb. It's important to have the .ipynb extension because that is a Jupyter notebook. Now please note that this is in the same main section of this folder of mine where my spreadsheet is. It is not inside the .github instructions. It's not inside of that folder. It's outside of that folder. So there we go. It's open and we see a Jupyter notebook. So let me close this Explorer once again. Just give us a bit more space. I'm just going to open up my GitHub Copilot on the right-hand side. Now, again, as I say, my way is a little bit pedantic. What I'm going to do is install a virtual environment. I like to do that for each and every project. All my data files for a specific research project lives inside a folder, and I create a virtual version of Python inside of that folder. I stick to the paradigm of not messing up my main Python installations. I create a virtual copy of that called a virtual environment inside of every folder, and that folder contains all my research work for that specific project. So I'm going to click here on select kernel, and I'm going to scroll down there and it says Python environments. I'm going to click on that. Now I'm not going to select Python right now. Do not do that because that's your main version of Python that you installed. If you've installed more versions, you'll see them listed here. I'm going to go to this, create a Python environment. That's what I want to select. Now I do not have my Conda package manager installed on this system, so I'm going to go for a virtual environment. So I'm going to click on VENV. Then only will I select Python. Do not select Python right at the beginning. I want to create a virtual environment and put a copy of Python in that virtual environment. So now I'll hit this version of Python, which is installed on my system. And we're going to see on the right-hand side, it's going to create a virtual environment, install Python in this folder. And anything we do with Python, if we're going to add packages, etc., it's only going to happen inside of this folder. So I'm not what we call messing up. What I call messing up my main Python installation. So that's going to take a couple of seconds. And we can see at the top now it says .venv python 3.13.2. So this version of Python is running inside only of this folder. So let's interact now with Copilot. So right at the bottom, you can see this is where I'm just going to enter my prompt. But what I want to be careful about is this little drop down right at the bottom. It says ask, agent, and edit. Normally it'll just be in ask mode. That's just where you write a normal prompt, but I want this to be in agent mode. So be sure to click agent. And so what I've done, I've written this prompt before. I've just copy and pasted it into this area here where you write your prompt. But remember, this is an agent mode. Now, one other thing I see right at the top, it's very tiny, even though that I've really increased the size of the text. It's still quite small, but if you look carefully, you'll see analysis.ipynb is open there, but I want to instruct the agent to use those instructions that I've written. So I'm going to say add context. And now you'll see a list of things that you can add. Now, sometimes, and unfortunately I don't know why, if I click on instructions, this file notebook, remember we said notebook.instructions.md is there. Sometimes it is not. I'm going to select it because it is there. And now you can see it's open. Notebook instructions, it's right there. So it knows to follow those instructions. If you do not see that, just go to add and say files and folders, and then click on that notebook.instructions.md file. That will also work. So now in the context, we can see it's going to use the instructions and it uses this notebook file, both of them. So I'm going to leave again this prompt that I've written, quite extensive prompt that I've written for the data analysis. So this is not about the notebook itself. I've put that in the instructions to the agent. This is my prompt. So you can copy and paste it down below. I'm going to quickly read through this. It's tiny again, even on my screen, even though I've increased the size of the font. So I'm just going to read it to you quickly, just to give you a sense, of how particular we want to be here. So I'm said the data file contains observations for 166 participants in a study. Participants received either placebo or an active intervention, and their heart rates in beats per minute were averaged over a 10-minute period. So there's the heart rate in 10 minutes, and it's averaged so that every observation is this is a heart rate in beats per minute. So the heart rate observations are in the data column, and the group allocation is captured in the group column. And once again, see, I put those little tick marks there just to indicate, in some sense to the model, the large language model, to Claude, that this is some form of code. You need not use that. So I'm saying the group column has two classes: group 1 for the placebo group and group 2 for the active intervention group. I say in all code and code analysis and text, replace group 1 with placebo group and group 2 with intervention group. Because if I create plots, etc., I don't want to see group 1, group 2. I want to, have a nice plot that says placebo group, intervention group. And then I also say replace data with heart rate beats per minute. That's what I want to see in my plots. I don't want to see data because that's just the name of that column. In the first row, that's the column header representing this variable name. I actually want nice descriptive words. So say analyze the data using the following plan. First, do univariate data analysis. Calculate summary statistics and data visualization for each column. If the column contains a numerical observations, calculate the mean, sample standard deviation, sample variance, median, minimum, maximum, quartiles, and the interquartile range. Create any appropriate plots to visualize the data. If the column contains categories, calculate the frequency and the relative frequency of each class, and create any appropriate plots to visualize the data. Then number 2, comparative summary statistics. Calculate the same summary statistics of the observations in the data column, but for each class in the group column. Create a box and whisker plot and other appropriate plots to visualize the data. Number 3, test the hypothesis that there's a difference in the heart rate between the two groups. Test for the assumptions for the use of a parametric test using data visualization and appropriate statistical tests. If the assumptions fail, use a non-parametric test. And this is where your knowledge of data analysis really shines through. I see this, people mentioning that, these things just do it all for you and sort of there's no critical thinking involved. But the more you know the subject that you're dealing with, the better prompt you can write, the better the outcome is going to be. Remember, if I just uploaded this to ChatGPT or Gemini or Claude and I said just analyze this data for me, it's going to do a fairly good job. But was it going to be this rigorous? Was it going to test for the assumptions for the use of whatever statistical test it decided on? And if you have that knowledge, you can put it in a prompt and your prompts will be that much better and the results should be at least that much better. Number 4, calculate an interval estimate for the difference in the mean of the data observations for each of the categories of the group column. Use a 95% confidence level and interpret the result. Number 5, calculate and interpret the effect size of the difference in the heart rate between the two groups. And number 6, write a comprehensive summary of the results. And so that's my prompt. And again, I'm in agent mode. I'm going to use Claude 4, and now I'm just going to click on send. Now the agent is going to go to work. You can see there notebook.instructions.md, so it's going to follow those instructions for the creation of this notebook. And now this is going to take some time. And you can see what it's doing here on the right hand side. Let me try and increase the size just one more time. Maybe that's a little bit better, although I cannot see anything on my screen anymore because everything is so big. Anyway, you can follow along if you do this yourself, read what it says. And it's working, and look at this, it's created a nice title for us that's in a markdown cell. We can see a little text. This notebook analyzes heart rate data for a study involving 166 participants. This is all written for me. There is all the package import, and look at the code there. Going to give this nice crisp high DPI plots for us. But look at the right hand side now. It says, well, I need to install these packages, pandas, numpy, matplotlib, seaborn, scipy. These are not installed in my virtual environment yet. So it says, the agent says to me, well, can I continue doing this? I'm just going to click the drop down and I'm going to say, yes, allow in this workspace. In this folder that I'm in that contains my whole project at the moment. I'm going to allow that in this workspace. And the agent carries on. It's going to do this a couple of times. If it finds error in the code, it's going to say, can it correct, etc. You can just say yes, or, read what the agent requires from you and take the appropriate action yourself. And it's just going to run now. What we can see at the moment, it's installing these packages. Remember, in a virtual environment, you only need to install the packages once. So if I'm going to create another notebook here, those packages will already be available to me. But the first time around, those packages need to be installed, and that's what's happening at the moment. And there we go. It now says we've installed all those packages. Can we restart the kernel, please? You have to restart Python so that these packages that have been installed, that they are available. Once again, I'm going to do the drop down and say allow in this workspace. And now it says it's going to run these cells. I'm going to give it permission. Once again, I'm going to say yes, allow in this workspace. And now it's going to, execute this code that it's written in this first code cell. There we go. It's creating a new section where it's going to do data loading and preparation of our data set. There's the code that it's written. You can see that it's importing our spreadsheet file. It's changing the name from data to heart rate beats per minute. And it's changing group 1 to placebo group, group 2 to intervention group. If you know a little Python, you can follow along. If you don't know Python, the agent's going to fix the code for you. Now you can see all the print statements. I told it in the instructions file not to use excessive print statements, but it didn't really listen to me. But that's fine. When I create notebooks myself, I tend not to use the print function at all. But I think it's done a pretty good job. And it's also written some text for us. It says the dataset contains 166 participants with heart rate measurement in beats per minute. The placebo group has 88 participants, while the intervention group has 78 participants. How nice. There's a nice little markdown cell, normal English, bold face for the interesting bits. I think it's fantastic. Now it's going to do some univariate data analysis for us. There we go. It says, 166 cases. The mean heart rate is 89.34 with a standard deviation of 6.93. You can see it's done everything that I have, all the summary statistics that I wanted. And now look at this. It even writes it out in a normal text cell. So it says the mean heart rate X bar was 89.34, standard deviation, the median, the range, the interquartile range. It's got everything there for me. It's continuing. Now it's doing the column that contains the categorical data. It says 88 were in the placebo group, 78 in the intervention group. That means 53% and 47%. That was the result of the code analysis, but it also writes this in nice, neat text for me. It now writes some code to create a bunch of data visualization. Look at that. We see a histogram of the heart rate, a bit small, but you can see it has the median and the mean there in green and red. We see a box and whisker plot. We see a QQ plot. And then we see just a bar chart of the placebo group and the intervention group. And we see 88 and 78. Let's increase the size a little bit there. Hopefully you can see a bit better. And now it even tells us in a normal text cell, univariate analysis interpretation, a histogram, a box plot, a QQ plot, and a group distribution. Now it's going to do comparative summary statistics. There's all the code. Here's the result of the code. In the placebo group, 88 with a mean of 90.25. And if we look at the intervention group, 78 with a mean of 88.31. It's all there. The difference in means in that order of subtraction would be negative 1.94. So this is all done with print statements. And then the result. So it says here Copilot has been working on this problem for a while. It can continue to iterate. I'm just going to say continue. And now it's done a nice little text cell for me saying, all the comparative summary statistics. And it's written the intervention group shows both a lower mean heart rate and a slightly less variability compared to the placebo group. Now it's created some code for our plots. And look at that. We see, it's very difficult to see, but there is a box and whisker plot. We see the two histograms there. We see a violin plot. And we just see a strip plot. Lots of data visualization, all saying exactly the same thing, but depending on, which you prefer, you have all the data visualization there. It then writes some normal text explaining all of this. Then it's going to do hypothesis testing. It's going to be testing parametric test assumptions. You can see there our null hypothesis that the two population means are equal. The alternative hypothesis that the two population means are not the same. It's chosen an alpha level of 0.05. It's written code to test for the assumptions for the use of a parametric test. It says a normality test. It shows a Shapiro-Wilk test for the placebo group and for the intervention group. It's testing for homogeneity of variance using Levine's test. Looking at the sample sizes there, and it says the normality assumption is violated, the equal variance assumption is violated, and adequate sample size is met. So it's going to recommend a non-parametric test, the Mann-Whitney U test. And it actually gives us a nice explanation there. Again, just a normal text. Now it's going to do the statistical tests. There's the Python code for that. And we can see Mann-Whitney U statistic 3924 with a p-value of 0.11. And we can see the level of significance there of 0.05. It's also done Welch's test for us. That is unequal variance t-test. And it's done the standard t-test. You can see all of those there. And you can see in all cases, we failed to reject the null hypothesis. All our p-values are larger than alpha value of 0.05. So there's our conclusion based on the Mann-Whitney U test. The most appropriate test given the violated assumptions. We see our U statistic, our p-value, and our effect size, which is quite small. So conclusion, there is no statistically significant difference in heart rate between the placebo and intervention groups at the 0.05 significance level. However, there's a small effect size present and the p-values from all tests suggest the difference may be marginally significant. Good. Confidence intervals. So it's going to calculate the confidence intervals for us there, which we can see negative 0.24 and 4.12. And so 0 is within that interval, and that supports, of course, the fact that we failed to reject the null hypothesis. It's written it nicely for us there. The 95% confidence interval for the difference in mean heart rate is negative 0.24 to 4.21 beats per minute. And the interpretation there, we can be 95% confident that the true difference in the mean heart rate between the placebo and the intervention group lies between negative 0.24 and 4.92. Since the interval contains 0, it suggests that there may be no meaningful difference between the two groups, which is consistent with our non-significance hypothesis test. Absolutely fantastic. The effect size analysis. There it's written the code for us. And we see Cohen's D there, how to calculate Cohen's D, and the effect size is indeed a small effect size, 0.2816. It also has some other effect sizes there for us. And then a nice interpretation. Practical significance, while not statistically significant, the intervention shows us a consistent small effect in reducing the heart size. The 88.8% overlap between the distributions indicates substantial similarity between the two groups, etc. And then finally, our comprehensive summary and conclusion. It's going to write some text in a markdown cell for us there, no doubt. And there we go. It's done some nice, a whole report for us there. Absolutely fantastic. And if you read the chat on the right-hand side, it's saying the exact same thing. Now I'm going to eventually click on the keep button. I'm quite happy with this. And there is my completed Jupyter notebook. I didn't write any code. I didn't write any of these markdown cells. Remember, these are markdown. If I double click on them, you can see that's a markdown cell. If we execute that, we see that it's rendered quite nicely. You can change any of this. And that is it. Look at that fantastic data analysis of this whole notebook created for me. I love Jupyter Notebooks. I think, at least for me, this is the de facto standard in all my data analysis. And now you can get an agent to do all of this for you. So let's just go one step further. I'm going to write the following in the prompt section. I'm still in agentic mode. So I've written install the required packages to convert analysis.ipynb to HTML format. Now when I have research meetings and I just want to send a copy of this notebook to my colleagues, which are not necessarily data analysts or statisticians, and they are fellow clinicians most of the time, and I want to share the research document with them, I usually convert this to HTML or PDF. So let's convert this to HTML format. I'm instructing the agent to do this for me. So let's see what it does. And it says, I'll help you install the required packages, convert the Jupyter Notebook to HTML format. It says, great, I see the notebook is well structured. Well, of course, you would think so. You created it. It's going to install all the required packages. You can see it's installing the packages. Now it's going to say, can it execute all of this in a terminal for me? I'm going to say continue. Great, now we have an HTML file. If I go back here, we can see there's analysis.html, and that just opens up in any browser. But what if you don't want that? Maybe you want a PDF version of this. Let's do that. So I've just said convert analysis.ipny to PDF format. And there we go. We can see analysis.pdf is available now as well. So you can share either your HTML or your PDF version. So if we look at this, I'm just going to delete this extra cell. We don't need that. Here we go. We see a beautifully created research notebook, all done with an agent.